The joy of mowing, one slow pass at a time. Some of you are old enough to remember the joy of sex. In 1972, a doctor named Alex Comfort convinced millions of people that one of life's greatest joys deserved its own instruction manual. I'd like to propose a sequel. It smells like gasoline, requires hearing protection, and occasionally sends grass clippings down your shirt. I will call this the joy of mowing. I'm willing to bet the average person spends more time mowing than they do in the bedroom, but this is just my guess. For most of my working life, I outsource detailed lawn and field mowing to other people. I felt underpowered, strapped for time, and just not good enough. The old farm didn't have much pasture to speak of, so bush hogging was a task that needed to be completed once a year, maybe twice at most. Months before the pandemic, I finally bought my own tractor. Before then, I had to beg annual field mowing duties from dudes who arrived with equipment in tow and a self-righteous glamour of having swooped in to complete an impossible task. I was jealous of their horsepower. I yearned for the rumble of my very own diesel engine and the full body sway that would start slow and build as I let off the clutch and the mower blades went into action. In many ways, I began stepping into my power the moment I signed the credit application for my very own tractor. The purchase was a long time coming, so I commemorated it by snapping a photo of the glowing orange machine and immediately posted it to Facebook. When I say stepping into my power, I'm not talking about the machine itself, though the rumble can cut through small trees. I mean my ability to trust my choices, even when they might appear wrong, and to claim the space around my physical and spiritual self without asking for permission. The tractor arrived the moment I started claiming conviction for my life. It took me a few decades to understand that peace and empowerment were my birthright, as they are yours. Yours might not look like a tractor, but the point is to recognize your symbol and move toward it. It will probably feel intimidating. Most worthwhile things do. But confidence is a power that builds slowly. Fear and excitement often feel remarkably alike. You have the same rush, the same quickened pulse. What will you do with this energy? As I basked in the glow of my new tractor purchase, I received some very odd feedback. A family member told me that the post announcing the purchase was in poor taste and I shouldn't gloat. Someone went out of their way to tell me that I'd made a frivolous purchase. What use did I have for a tractor? But what deeply stood out was how much people just generally hated having to mow anything. For many, it feels like wasted time, an unending chore that renews with the sun and the rain. My family continually bitches about it. Strangers complain to me about mowing, and I'm pretty sure the reason the farm we're sinking into now was sold was because of the intricacies of the constant grass detail this place demands. The previous owner complained when we walked the property and also noted the grass cutting when we sat down to finalize the sale. Recently, I bush hogged the fields at this new farm for the first time. The mower attachment has rested idly since the move, but the tractor has been going nonstop. The people who generously hauled the tractor and implements to Lavender Hill banged the mower around a bit, so there was some uncertainty about the wheel. Some ingenious greasing by Christopher, however, eventually had me ready to finally tackle the hills of the graveyard field. I pressed the clutch, eased the PTO into action, and felt the mower whir to life behind me. I'd started early spring with the smaller jobs of lawn and weed eating. As I did this, I paused every few moments to snap photos of weeds and various grasses, and then searched for their government names and meticulously monitored their habitats. Mowing the paddocks with the smaller equipment brought me into the world of seed heads and overseeding. There is much work to be done to reclaim these pastures for grazing, but the act of mowing brought me into intimate connection with the ground and the roots and the droughts and the rains. I noticed where years of lowered mowing decks had scalped the reaching roots of the oak trees. I became acquainted with the wild bordering plants along the fence lines, the trifoliate orange and the blackberry. I named our horse operations Bramblewood long before we arrived here, but the naming was a prescience, a knowing. I learned that the deep taproots of the weeds hold the ground together in dry weather. But most of all, I vowed not to use herbicides or pesticides in these fields. It might take me 2 years or 12, but I will learn the ground well enough to understand how to ease grasses into naturally thriving out the weeds. I could not do this without mowing the land totally by myself, at least for now, and with many thanks to a neighborhood teen who comes to my rescue when the fence lines are overtaken with weeds. But mowing the big fields for the first time with the tractor, comprehensively topping the blackberries after they'd had time to grow and multiply big fruit, was intimate in a wholly different way than edging the fields with a zero turn. For one, I was off the ground. I inched slowly, learning the wobble of the tires on the hillsides, creeping along until I found the right angle. Mowing hills is a tricky undertaking. We'd had slopes and embankments at the old farm, but nothing like the terraced convergence of these historic fields at Lavender Hill. In many places, it felt like a single slope angled in 3 different directions. I turned the steering wheel in increments, to the left and to the right, keeping tight control of the slant. The horses were ridiculous. The boys wandered in and out of my sight, sometimes coming to a stop directly in front of me, pausing to spread their legs and pee, sniffling the tractor, and being generally nosy and curious about what I was doing. The big field was a several-day undertaking, and by day 3, I was one of the herd, halting on the hillside at a precarious angle to wait until they were ready to move on and the path opened up again for me to move. I measured the afternoon in Elizabeth Gilbert instead of hours as I maneuvered the tractor, my earbuds chanting in the low drone of her voice as she read all the way to the river, under the ear protection that kept out the whir of the motor. For a time, it was like she was living in my head. Somewhere around the middle of the book, while Gilbert untangled the knots of addiction, codependency, and all the impossible ways we can lose ourselves trying to save someone else, I was untangling the field. There was something oddly fitting about the 2 parallels. So much of my journey with human relationships and life echoed hers, but I was proud to finally be settled. The farm daily asks people to live the 12 steps, no matter their addictions, and horses had slowly whittled me down into someone who didn't need to chase the rush of dopamine and adrenaline through idealized relationships and unrealistic dreams. As Gilbert described the painstaking work of putting her life back in order, I looked over my shoulder at neat rows appearing in the high grasses, one slow pass at a time. Every lap closed a loop. Every strip was evidence that I had moved forward. I'd reach the end of a row and maneuver at the fence line with the assurance that I could keep going. Bush hogging is different from mowing a suburban lawn. When the blades start whirring, their purpose is to reclaim ground. The mower helps me make sense of the wildness. In more ways than one, the tractor helps me reclaim the possibilities, trimming away the dense overgrowth so the pasture can breathe again. Gilbert's words echoed in my head, the idea of recovering a life that was overgrown with fear and addiction, all the obligations. Mowing isn't just maintenance. It's a way to draw lines through the chaos. Humans crave patterns, and maybe that's why mowing feels so good to me. Life gives us very few tasks we can actually finish. Emails multiply and laundry reproduces. The news never ends. Social media has no bottom. Most of us spend our days pushing invisible work from one screen to another. A field is refreshingly honest. You begin at one corner, you end at the other, and when you climb down from the tractor and look back, the world is measurably different because you were there. Every Thursday morning, I share a new essay exploring horses, old houses, forgotten history, faith, human behavior, and weird happenings on the farm that more often than not link back to life and humanity. The weekly essay is always free to read, but paid subscribers help keep this work going while receiving access to the growing archive, audio narrations, and additional subscriber-only bonuses along the way. Whether you're a free or paid subscriber, or you're just passing through, I'm so glad that you're here. My old landlord held conversations in a series of rapid, unrelated thoughts. In one such talk, he espoused on the benefits of no mow. Except, I thought he said a single word, no mow. I assumed it was a Native American concept, something old and obscure. I sounded the word out phonetically and tried to research the concept. With little luck, I finally asked him a few years later, what is that idea about mowing that you mentioned? No, mow, May, he repeated. You don't start mowing the lawn until the month of May. I'm really good at overcomplicating things. The idea that everyone should have a neatly mowed lawn is actually very recent in human history. Before the 1700s, ordinary people didn't have lawns because they couldn't afford to waste usable area. Every bit of land around a home had to earn its keep. If you had open grass, it was pasture for the animals, a hayfield, or a place to grow food. A patch of ornamental grass that served no purpose would have been silly. The first lawns belonged to the wealthy aristocracy of Europe, especially in England and France. These status symbols demonstrated that you had so much land and so much wealth that you didn't need to farm all of it. Sheep were often employed to do the mowing. Our servants used scythes to keep the grass short, a tremendous amount of labor devoted solely to appearance. It wasn't until 1830 that an English engineer named Edwin Beard Budding patented the first mechanical lawnmower. He adapted a machine used to trim carpet in textile mills into a real spinning mower for grass. Suddenly, maintaining a lawn became much more practical. But lawns didn't become an American obsession until after World War II. The suburban boom of the 1940s and 1950s produced neighborhoods of single-family homes with front yards. Developers planted lawns, mower manufacturers sold machines, and companies selling fertilizer and weed killers convinced Americans that a perfect lawn was a part of being a good homeowner. The modern lawn became almost a civic duty. Today, Americans devote roughly 40 million acres to lawns, making turf grass one of the largest irrigated crops in the country, even though we don't eat it. I'm fascinated by watching horses eat grass and love the sound their mouths make as they wander, search, and chew. If I watch them eat long enough, I'm tempted to take a mouthful of grass. Sometimes I lean over and tear some blades with my fingers so I can join in. But grass still holds no nutritional value for humans. A theory about our mostly useless appendix is that it once helped humans digest fibrous grasses. Long before we learned to cook over a fire, we might have been grazing alongside the equids. I've written about how agricultural land is priced very differently than acreage that is targeted for development. It's ironic that our lawns are valued more for appearance than our fields are for production. Bush hogging a pasture is permission for a person to check their perfection at the gate. Mowing encourages healthy forage by preventing woody plants from taking over a field and reducing the spread of invasive species. The orderly rows are satisfying to make, but the goal is to promote healthy growth. It's easy to dismiss mowing a field as mindless work because most people think of mowing in terms of managing a lawn. Farmers have been cutting back vegetation to renew grazing land for thousands of years. My orange tractor is the latest tool in a process that once included scythes, sickles, and animal-powered motors. Balancing the tractor along the ridges of the converging hills in the graveyard pasture, I notice where the water flows and the shape of the land underneath me. I learned the difference between leaves, which are edible for the horses, which are not, and where the carpet of poor Joe is hungry for lime. The weeds tell a story. Don't get me wrong, the lawn at Lavender Hill has sculpted shrubs. It's not all fields and rural idealism. I've spent most of my adult life figuring out how to grow food for animals to eat, so I'm having to teach myself what to do with a hedge trimmer and how to hold the weed eater at just the right angle to edge. The banks that line the roads are monsters that have me Googling remote-controlled mowers late at night after a day spent alternating between a push mower and a weed whacker. There are some thick stalks that grow so wide and tall in the ditches that I have to lop them individually by hand. But even the ditches tell me a story when I'm forced to get cozy with them. Ditches are historical documents. They tell me about the people who once lived in that place and about the soil and habitats. Weeds are not random. They're messengers. I can't drive down the road today without eyeing bunches of stray Johnson grass. Named for Colonel William Johnson of Alabama, who religiously sang the plant's praises, Johnson grass was native to the Mediterranean and Western Asia before being imported to the American South in the early 1800s as a miracle forage. It grows quickly and produces enormous amounts of biomass. When the plant is young, livestock happily graze it. The plant spreads through underground rhizomes and seeds, which is a double whammy for keeping it in one spot. If you plow the field, the rhizomes are sliced into pieces, each capable of becoming another plant. Johnson grass plays a long game. Farmers describe it as a plant that has to be negotiated with because it cannot be managed. It colonizes overgrazed areas and bare soil, exploiting disturbances, and gives me 100 metaphors for life. Johnson grass behaves a lot like humans, finding a way in and responding to bad conditions. In theory, Johnson grass truly does make excellent forage for animals, but if it's stressed by drought or frost, the plants accumulate toxic levels of hydrogen cyanide, prussic acid. Since it grows everywhere, eradicating the grass is next to impossible. It's a plant that cannot be ignored. Since I started reading the ditches at Lavender Hill, I can't unsee them. The volunteer pine has a story, as does the bright, sweet gum sapling. The plants tell me what holds water and what remains barren. The depth of the ditches tells stories about the construction of roadways, each generation digging itself in deeper. I stop seeing weeds and start seeing biographies. Every stand of Johnson grass, every patch of poor Joe, every blackberry cane and sugar gum sapling introduces itself and explains why it came to be there. The shoulder of the road is one of those forgotten boundaries that hold the collective memory of a place. We have lots of sayings about ditches in the South. You can find yourself on the wrong side of a ditch, or you can dig yourself a ditch, and you can live with one wheel in the ditch. Ditches have a lot to say when you're forced to mow them. The ditches on this farm are my very least joyful spots to mow, but I'm thankful for their passageways and accumulations. I'm thankful for the details the ditches show me when I stop long enough to look and connect their stories etched in the dirt. I don't see everything on the first pass of the mower. The details are slow arriving. A blade of grass, the unfolding of a blossom. I notice these details as I walk to catch a horse, as I trim the brush along the field edges, as I creep the tractor down hills. Maybe this is the joy of mowing, the busy permission to stop and pay attention. It doesn't hurt that when I mow, I wear earbuds under ear protection, so if someone wants me to stop and talk, they're going to have to work extra hard to make my wheels stop turning. The more I've surrendered to learning the patterns of the grasses this summer, the less patience I have for small talk. This year is going by too quickly. I don't want to miss anything. Shortening the grass is just one layer to the chore. Like working alongside horses, I'm pulled into a nonverbal conversation with the land and the weather. My OCD is given a job. My anxiety is given a channel to direct intensity. I feel the sun and watch the moon rise. At the end of the day, I'm tired and sleep comes easy. I'm going to repeat the question I asked you last week, and I hope I have some takers. What work do you engage in that tires your body but fills your spirit? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next week, I hope you find something that makes your heart race, preferably with fewer relationship complications and more horsepower. Love, Kim.